So the Uhtric mod is a pretty small one, and didn't have any clear theme as it went through its description, and even after finishing it, I'm not sure how I'd sell it to you other than, what if you had knife subclass and some extras? But that's actually pretty exciting since I don't know what to expect, so let's jump right into it and see what we find. There's a cave right next to spawn, and I immediately come across the first piece of modded content in this glowing blue ore that I can't mine, which is sad, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's similar to demonite ore, and if demonite can be blown up, so should this stuff. It only took a few minutes until I found a bomb in a pot and threw it into some of this blue ore I'd found, and sure enough, it does destroy it. And now I got my hands on the Calestis ore. I doubt I can do anything with it, but maybe there's a few things that are craftable immediately. But for now, I found some gold and stumbled upon my first modded enemy, the Blabberous Giganteus. Why are all these names so complicated? Let's get a house and storage set up and craft our first of the Calestis bars, but I can only make one for now, so there's not a whole lot I can do with that. But let's give it to the guide and see what can be made out of it, and it looks like it can make all the things you'd expect. It makes a mage armor set, tools, and weapons, but all of them require me to take down one of the evil biome bosses, or at least harvest some of the tissue samples or shadow scales. These all look cool, but I never ended up using any of these because, as I mentioned, this mod adds a knife subclass, so I'm going to use melee armor and knives, and none of these are that. I found a wooden boomerang and made an enchanted one from it and died in the jungle while searching for a modded surface biome. I went the other direction and walked into the Crimson where another modded enemy met me. Thankfully, it's just a disease cell, no need to fear that. On the other side is the tundra where a snowman with a snowball shotgun approaches but gets stuck in a ditch where I slowly follow him until he disappears in the caves. But I guess while I'm down here, I'll explore and mine a bunch of gold, loot a treasure chest with flurry boots, and well, that's about it. Back at home, I found a flying shrub, and I think he's pretty neat, so I killed him and got this leaf, which I promptly handed to the guide. There's a good number of things I can craft, and yet it seems to be barely stronger than wooden weapons. It's a nice idea, but I only ran into one of these enemies, at least in early progression, and I'd need several more leaves to craft a full set of gear or really anything. I was already on my way to better gear, so this strikes me as something that wouldn't be all that helpful unless I spent a significant amount of time hanging around the forest. But that's alright, because I can craft frost knives. I opened the door and let the zombies in so I could test out this new weapon, and it didn't exactly melt the zombies, but these are pre-boss knives, so that's not exactly surprising. But then I found myself in the glowing mushroom biome, trying to kill a bunch of slimes, and it felt like these were taking a much longer time to kill them than the enchanted boomerang. I suppose this isn't an ideal situation for knives, but I'm starting to feel like the knife class is going to be a bit underpowered. I wandered about the jungle a bit and found a boomstick, which is too bad since I won't be using it. It's such a good weapon. A weapon I did use was the Roach Rapier, which is an interesting weapon that does a few melee swings before shooting a projectile, but once it shoots, you can't swing the sword anymore. You can switch to another weapon though, so there's potential here. I visited the Sky Islands and found fledgling wings and a Star Fury, which immediately outclasses the Roach Rapier. There were also these galactic blobs, which I think are the coolest enemy this mod adds, and they wouldn't stop attacking me. That's not a bad thing though, since I got some galactic gel from them, and those, a few stars and a Star Fury, are used to create Star Blast knives, and testing these for 2 seconds is all you need to know that this weapon may very well be quite broken. So broken, in fact, that I bet I could beat the Brain of Cthulhu as my first boss. I hadn't found a single eye summon so far, and I didn't feel like crafting one, so I headed to the Crimson with golden armor, broke 3 hearts, and summoned the Brain, trusting these knives to carry me to victory. Unfortunately, the star knives are not totally busted and seem to be reasonably balanced. I didn't beat the Brain, though I did come very close. I realized I actually did have an eye summon after this, so I took him down using these knives before returning to the Brain. With a little more preparation than before, he fell as well, and a few new NPCs were ready to greet me after this victory, and he sells, interesting stuff. This, flag and tank are interesting. I have no idea why these are here or what they got to do with anything, but here they are. With the Brain and eye down, it's time to get to the first modded boss of the run. You need a rare geode to summon him, but that's just its name, it's not actually rare. You can craft it with just some gems you find in the underground, and it's in the underground that we'll be summoning him. he is actually meant to be fought pre-brain, so I was a bit overconfident and summoned him in the confined mines below. The boss actually ended up getting stuck in a lot of the blocks, and the Star Knives were able to go through those blocks and hit him, but he was able to get in a good shot here and there, and since there's no room to dodge, I lost the first fight. That was a bit silly of me to do, so I created an arena and summoned him again. Oh, he's called the Dredger, by the way. Let's talk about him. He's a very simple boss with only 3 attacks that he alternates through at random. With 1 attack, he throws a pickaxe at you like a slow boomerang, but I found it pretty confusing actually because it homes on you during its return trip unless you make a very clean or sharp dodge when it's first thrown at you. It's a little wacky. With another attack, he throws 3 bombs, and it's a pretty quick attack that I found hard to anticipate, and another attack isn't really an attack, but he summons 3 or so little minions. He also doesn't have a second phase in the way that I'm most accustomed to, where the second phase happens halfway through the battle. For him, it happens like at about a quarter of his health, and now there's fire all over the place. It's not actually that much more difficult, and although I did die the first time he went into this form, if you just watch him back away, slowly but surely, there we go. Does that count as a win or a loss? Whether it does or not, I actually didn't notice he had died when I was playing, so I actually did some searching in the jungle for life crystals and began work on Elevator before someone in chat said the boss had died. Thankfully, the treasure bag was still there and his drops weren't really that impressive, but he does give you a nice mining accessory for those of you who actually make mining loadouts. Other than that, he drops a flail, and that's actually everything he drops. Fighting him again won't give you more loot. That's it. I returned to the Elevator, finished it, and collected enough hellstone to make armor as well as a new knife type. I must say, I rather enjoy just how many different knives they give you. There's any kind of knife you could think of, and I guess it follows the typical sword progression. For every sword you can get in Terraria, there's a knife variant. The only problem is that even these Hellstone knives don't do a whole lot of damage, and I'm starting to question whether I can even beat Skeletron before the night's end with these. When George the Knifesmith joins the party, I expected him to sell only knives basically, but instead he sells 4 different accessories that all increase knife damage in one way or another. Now this is what I've been looking for. Better yet, you can combine all 4 accessories with the Tinkerer's Workshop, but I don't have that yet, so I just took a damage boost and summoned the treasure to test it out, and sure enough, they are a whole lot more viable now. I returned to the dungeon, and I suppose I'm sort of overgeared for this battle. I usually avoid mining Hellstone pre-Skeletron because I like getting more life out of my gold or platinum armor. I think I just mined Hellstone this time because I wanted exploding fire knives. Whatever the case, I took him down and ran to the dungeon with one thing on my mind, and that is the water knives. I forget if that's what they're actually called, but they are the dungeon knife variant, and I need them to get the Knight's Edge knives. Also, not what their actual name is, but you know what I'm talking about. At first, I thought these knives were found in treasure chests, but after unlocking a bunch of them, nothing came up. Then someone from chat spoiled how I get them, and it turns out these knives supposedly have a 10% drop chance from Dart Casters. Only thing is, I was just about to get a Dart Caster banner, and none of these knives had dropped. I'm not convinced the drop rate is as high as I was told, but I did get them after quite a long time. And these things go through walls, which is super cool, but that doesn't matter since I'm going straight to the Twilight knives, the knife variants of the Knight's Edge, and I must admit, they're pretty cool. Just like the next boss, the Charcoal Snowman. This boss is similar in a lot of ways to the Dredger. He's small, has a small health pool, hits like a truck, and doesn't have a pattern but just 4 or so attacks he will use at random. There's one where snowballs lag behind him after shooting at your position, one that I presume is carrot missiles. Another attack, he lobs snowballs like a mortar, and another is just snowballs going in random directions around him. And finally, he can shoot charcoal spikes in all directions. That one surprised and killed me during the first fight. The second time around, I took him down and was rewarded with carrot knives. These things might be a little weaker than the Twilight knives, but I'm a really big fan of them because they are not affected by gravity, or at least not that I can tell. They easily have the greatest range out of all the knives, but also, if knives drop from this boss, does that mean that it's possible that other bosses drop knives as well? I'm not sure all of them do. In fact, probably only 1 or 2 do, but I have no evidence of this. I'm just making an assumption based on what I got here. I cleared the Goblin army and saved the Goblin Tinkerer, so now I can craft all the knife accessories into one and finish the week by mining the obsidian houses in preparation for the Wall of Fresh. I was going to go straight to the wall, but I realized I only had Spectre boots, and those are hardly fast enough to deal with a fresh wall. I tried to buy a horse from the furry, but she wasn't selling, and I'm a bit confused as to how this works since I know horses are not a hard mode exclusive. I didn't have an aglet or an anklet of wind, which is why I didn't bother with lightning boots right from the get-go, but I checked the available recipes and discovered that the things the modded roaches drop can be crafted into a thing that makes an aglet or an anklet of wind, and I'm sure plenty of other things as well. Better yet, these beetles are rather common underground, not nearly as common as zombies at night or something, but still common enough that the grind for the roach shells didn't take that long at all. Boots in hand, on foot, I went to fight the wall, hoping the Twilight Knives could carry me to an easy win, but they aren't any stronger than a normal Knight's Edge, and I'm not very good at melee against the wall. I lost the first fight in a pretty miserable way. I did so poorly that I mined some Hellstone to get the Imp Staff for that little extra DPS before returning to the fight. This one was the exact opposite of the last fight, and I actually managed to dodge the wall's lasers consistently. Is there a good way to do this? I'm pretty sure I just got lucky. There's got to be some sort of method to this madness. Now it's time to smash altars, discover the Kobold knives look pretty cool, and mine a bunch of ore until I have full titanium armor and titanium knives. Which means all that's left is the final boss of the mod, the Cosmic Menace, who's listed as being after Queen Slime in progression. The other bosses in this mod have not been the most impressive, and I could easily have beaten them the first try if I'd put a little more forethought into the battles, but the Cosmic Menace was definitely in a different league as the others. He functions very much in the same way, with not having an actual pattern but alternating between several different attacks at random. Thing is though, I thought he did have a pattern during the first fight because he kept on alternating between two attacks over and over and over and over and over and over again, and I figured that's all he did. So when I was well into the battle and he suddenly did something new, I was caught totally off guard. Now, I'm not sure how I would describe many of his attacks. He has one where he shoots these magic scythes at you, another that looks very similar to that, but the main scythe projectiles isn't what you should be worrying about because the projectile is an illusion and will explode into a bunch of smaller scythes that are a much bigger problem. With another attack, he spawns a bunch of orbs that start small and then get big, and this one was the hardest to dodge at first, but eventually I got the hang of it and it became my favorite attack since I could park myself in one place and unload on the small flying menace of a boss. And finally, he can spawn in fiery scythes that home in on you, and I'm not sure I ever managed to actually dodge these entirely when he did this. It's quite hard to avoid. After defeating him, he dropped an accessory that is kind of an attack accessory. I don't know how to describe it, but it shoots little projectiles when you're close to enemies, and it's actually pretty on point and does good damage, so it's a pretty good accessory. And that's the mod. All there is now is more knives, and they got them in spades. As I said before, if there's a sword, there's a knife variant to it, but that doesn't actually mean the knife variants are equal to their sword counterparts. I tried the true Twilight knives and preferred them greatly over the true hollowed ones, and that's the exact opposite of how I view the swords. There's Empress knives, solar knives, mushroom knives that I better sold by the truffle. Most of these aren't actually that special in that they don't have any kind of special ability, which is sad. The Starburst knives had me hoping the hard mode knives would have all these fancy abilities, but most of them don't. After testing a bunch of them, I actually found the Martian knives to be in a league of their own. They are the only knife variant that has any amount of homing, and though it's not the best homing, it's not bad either. But even with that aside, even when I could consistently hit bosses with other knives and similar parts of progression, the Martian ones were just better. Strange, but I like it. In the end, this mod is basically the knife class mod with extras, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not the prettiest or fanciest or has the best stuff, but it's nice if you just want a little extra flavor on top of vanilla.